city jail and ongoing discussions with Harris County over the years, but suddenly things are moving again, partly as we really have reinvigorated our relationship with the county, and there are a number of areas where we're working very closely with them, and then partly because of actions that council has taken to change what's happening on our side of the jail equation, and then things that are happening over at Harris County where for the first time in years they actually don't have a serious overcrowding condition in the county jail. And so our interest is in moving forward quickly while all the stars are aligned. I'm going to ask Mr. Icken to bring all the council members up to date on what the current status is.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to run through a series of charts that gives the background and the current state, and then I'll conclude by pointing out that next week we'll be coming forward with an interlocal agreement with the county. By way of background, the city jail is increasingly costly and require a replacement, a statement we've made quite frequently. The jail at Reasoner was built in the 1950s. It was the old HPD headquarters. We have a second jail over in McAllen, which is not as in difficult a shape, but also one that is costly to operate. The total cost of our jail operation, county HPD, health department, and others, approach $30 million a year. And in fact, since 1989, the city has been operating under a consent decree because of overcrowding and a settlement of a lawsuit was put in place. During the development of some outside command stations on the west side and the southeast, it was contemplated that we would begin a decentralization process of our jails. What became clear as that process unfolded is that was equally a high-cost operation because of the staffing, the jail standards, and other things we have to meet in these command centers. I should point out, however, and as recently as yesterday, we had another meeting which we have quarterly with the court-appointed monitor. The city has been in compliance with the standards that we have right now, although, as I started out saying, those are increasingly costly operations for us to maintain. Next chart. There really are, and I've simplified here because there's some other characterizations, two types of prisoners we keep in our jail operations. One is those that relate to municipal offenses, so-called Class C offenses, and they are roughly 45% of our total prisoners. They're handled in accordance with actions by the prosecutors, by the judges in the municipal court. The sobering center, which we cut the ribbon on last week and will begin operations shortly at this time, is expected to take some of that load off as we bring people there in lieu of bringing them to jail. The target that we showed you then remains the number is 15 to 20% of the load of our municipal prisoners. We generally hold prisoners for up to 48 hours. There are some exceptions on the upper end, but the average duration of all of our prisoners is 21 hours in the city. The hold prisoners are for Class A and B felonies, and of course we are holding these people, misdemeanors and felonies, we are holding these people before they get processed by the county. The county has a bottleneck. The county has a bottleneck in the booking and arraignment center today on Commerce Street. We are, in effect, have a quota of people. We bring people over as the processing center has the capacity to handle people by the county today. So that these folks stay in the city jail for typically up to 24 hours, and then we bring them over as space is available in the processing center, and then the judicial system begins from that point. Last year, in total, we had 105,000 prisoners. We are not approaching total capacity today. The average number we have is more like 300 prisoners a day with a total capacity of 440, but at times it does peak, and it certainly creates the cost I've already said. The next chart. A little bit of history. In 2007, after a long discussion between the city and the county, we began and developed a prototype of a new booking, treatment, and housing center That went to the voters of the county at that time. The number was actually $228 million, and there were some increments that the county planned to add to that. The county voters turned that down. There was a lot of discussion of the impact of keeping people in jails. The county at that time was under a number of very significant orders to deal with overcrowding, but also there were issues on the placement of that facility near the bayou that received a lot of public attention at the time. Earlier this year, the mayor and I were approached by the county to begin those discussions. That approach started with Bill Jackson to me, the budget director of the county. We have had several discussions already on the nature of doing this, and we have agreed that we should bring this forward as a proposal. The schedule I'll outline right here is for the county to hire a consultant, and Commissioner's Court has already passed this last week while council was in recess to do this. I'll talk about how we will manage that in a second. But the process we have begun already. We had sheriffs and HPD folks along with the county budget officials and myself last week, is to redefine the project's goals. The old project had three basic components. It had a component of booking and processing arraignment. It had a second of diversion, which was some focus on mental health. And then the third was the housing component. I believe once we redefine the goals...
Housing is
jail, as in jail, correct. The jail component will not be part of these discussions. It could very well be that we will take that earlier project, redefine it some into different phases, but it is our belief that the processing component and some point of diversion will be part of this discussion. We need to finalize what the cost of this and what the proper allocation is between the city and the county in operating this. The county has issued an RFQ. That process is undergoing right now. It'll be a week or two more before submissions are made and determinations are made, and the city will be part of that process of selection. But we will develop the plans. Next chart. The city has always had some form of capital public service bonds available. We used a small portion of those for the sobering center when you approved the build-out of that facility. Today we have a little over $25 million available as our share of that. Whether that will be sufficient or not will determine as we go forward with the plans for doing this. Harris County has looked at their capital availability, and although there are some bonds available in the county, it is their belief that since the voters turned it down the first time, they need to go back to the voters this time, even if it is a different kind of project than it was at that time. The schedule they would like to be on and we would like to be on is an accelerated schedule. Both of us bring to our governing bodies a capital plan in June. We would like to have the conceptual framework of an agreement and the scope of what the project would be by June. So the expectation we all have is by June we will come back to you with a report on what we're doing here and what happens next. And we will negotiate as part of that an allocation of costs. Next chart. As I mentioned last week, Commissioner's Court approved the authorization for the Public Infrastructure Department. This is Art Story's department. John Blunt runs the architectural part of that. Began the solicitation of a process. It'd be generally limited to what size, what scope, what location. In general, the Sheriff's Office believes strongly that that location should be on San Jacinto, right near the Baker Street Jail. There is some infrastructure there. The county just built a new chilling plant behind that area, and that's likely to be the lowest cost place. There are some issues on the bayou. There are some issues on bike trails and issues that we will be working through at this point. The expected cost of this consultant is $250,000. We determined that the fastest way to get this started, although this is not going to be the final formula we agreed to, is to split that cost in half with the county in order to accelerate the process and move expeditiously. Our two legal departments in the city and the county have drafts going back and forth that are near finalization right now of what the interlocal agreement will be, and that will come to council next week for the formalization of that before the RFQ is finally signed or anything is done at the county level. Last chart is just recognizing to you the number of bodies that will be involved in this process. I'll be leading the effort from the city side, but clearly HPD, the municipal courts, and the legal department are involved with what we do this. We'll also have public works involvement. There are some issues with street abandonments and things in that location that need to be addressed, and we'll work with them. The sheriff's office has been fully involved in this, as is the county attorney. Facility management part of the county is involved, and then Phil Jackson of their Office of Management Services, the budget director, is involved. So I think we've engaged everybody that needs this. We all understand the priority of moving on this. We've been very clear that from a self-serving viewpoint, the city wants out of the jail business. The $30 million that we show is something that we believe can be significantly reduced as we go through this process. But there are issues on jailing Class C misdemeanors that have to be worked through with the judges and how we will handle this in the future. But all of those we will come back to you and report as this proceeds. Thank you, Mayor.
A couple of things. One, I want to thank actually Commissioner Raddick who really advanced this. Judge Emmett and I have had multiple conversations over the years that I've been in the mayor's office, but once Commissioner Raddick became engaged, it jumps forward, and I really appreciate him on that. What we need to recognize is this is a county facility we're talking about. It is not a city facility. The reason that our recommendation is that we go in 50-50 on the consultant up front is that we want to make sure that it meets our needs from the beginning. It is a county facility. We will pay proportionate costs for the service they provide us, but 55% of the prisoners that we hold today could be booked directly into the county jail. We have no responsibilities to take them and hold them. So we think that there is a fair balance point in there, and while, as Mr. Icken said, we're not going to be building a 50-50 processing center. This is an extension to the county jail. We, by being a part of the selection process for the consultant, we can maintain our interests throughout the process and make sure that our needs as well as the county's are respected throughout. This initial consulting contract will take us through the preliminary design and layout and site selection and so forth, but there will be obviously multiple discussions going forward. One being, what will our capital contribution be to the facility, and then farther down the road, what our per capita cost will be for any of our prisoners that, right now, we're taking care of their prisoners. They will ultimately, if we get out of the jail business, be taking some of our prisoners and we will work out an appropriate cost for that. Right now, it costs us approximately $300 a day to house a prisoner, and the county is significantly below that. So there are some real opportunities, as I said. The stars seem to be aligning on this. As part of the location discussion, this again is since it's a county facility, they'll have a little more weight on this. Discussions are about linking it to the existing facilities for the transport of prisoners. Right now, the current processing center and the jail, they move prisoners underground through the tunnel system, so for their arraignments and so forth. That has to be proximity has to be a consideration. We will ensure that any stakeholders, and Councilman Rodriguez, stakeholders who have property in our immediate vicinity will be made aware as this moves forward, but at this point, there are no prospective sites identified. That's still to be discussed. Chair recognizes Councilmember Christie.